Everything in life is a negotiation. When you cross the street,
Getting your coffee at Starbucks is a negotiation. You're probably in 3 to 7 negotiations every single day.
I think this system is designed to make sure I never get a clean setup. It just is driving me nuts. I got my second shot yesterday for COVID, and they told me I might get headaches and I might get fatigue. And this technology is fatiguing me to the end of my rope. And the only headaches I'm getting are trying to keep up with the way the technology can screw me over. So we're going to get started here. One question I'd ask is, anybody having any difficulty getting set up for the game tonight? You got your first decision. So everybody's doing fine, huh? Okay. Let's just check the names I haven't picked up yet. Diego Corona, I'm pretty sure he's here. Yeah, he's there right up at the top of the screen. Yuan Chang. Seeing Liang. Okay, Edsa Gomez. Christopher Hart. I don't know how he could have the gall not to be here because he worked so hard to get in this class. Vanessa Lavis.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay. David Maligo, I know I saw him down to, yeah, there he is, over on the right-hand side now. He moved up an aisle, up a row. And that's everybody. So what I want to show you this afternoon is some things about different kinds of strategies you can take for the game. And what I've done is kind of bounce ahead in what I've shown you so far to skip over the first part of the Mgmt book. But I have an assignment for you, and it's out on Blackboard. I've got a thing called BSG updates and another one called assignments. And so you may want to take a look at those on a regular basis. But I've got a heavy duty assignment for you to read between now and Wednesday or Thursday. And that's in this book. I'm going to enlarge myself here. I don't know how I get myself to be speaker, but Francisco, could you turn your mic? Well, your mic is off, so what can I tell you?
Oh, what happened, Professor?
I'm just trying to get myself enlarged here where I've got the full screen. And I got you on the full screen. Now how do I get myself on the full screen?
You're on the full screen for me, Professor.
You are, yes, you are on the full screen for me too.
Okay.
Yeah, for me as well.
All right. Well, this is the one I'm going to use. It's a strategy book. And the heavy duty assignment I have for you to read is from page 16 to page 21, 16 to 21. And there's, as simplistic as this approach is, there's some really good stuff that you want to be looking for in there that's relevant to what you're doing in the game and will be relevant to when we move on to looking at seriously at Michael Porter, which will be within the next two sessions that we have. So there you are. Now, what I want to, as I said, what I want to talk about today is about some of the strategic alternatives you can use. These are important to Porter, but it's important or more important to understand some of the things that Porter says about things like what he calls the 5 forces and the value chain, both of which you're going to learn about in the next couple of weeks. But for right now, we're going to just take a look at things that are applicable to what you'll be doing this evening and the next decision. So Peter Drucker's definition of strategy, which is pretty good, is the commitment of present resources to future expectations. Another way he puts that, and he says that it all involves risk. And another way he describes this, he said that when you're doing your strategic planning for the future, it's the process of crawling out on the end of the limb and sawing off the tree branch behind you. Now, I came up with my own definition of strategy, and it is this: it's a comprehensive plan to achieve a desired long-term outcome using available resources. Drucker would just what I said about Drucker, he'd say, well, no, you don't have to rely just on available resources. You have to do some anticipation of the resources you'll have in the future. But the idea of being comprehensive and long range, he would agree with. Now, I thought this definition up myself, but as I was doing some research a year or so ago, I found that it was in a book. So I can't take any credit for it except to announce that I like it. But it's comprehensive. A strategy is comprehensive in that it looks at all aspects of the business. And it has a long-term, it seeks to get a long-term outcome, because this is not the plan of the week. This is something where we want to look 1 or 2 years, probably 2 years or more, really, perhaps as long as an entire generation in terms of our planning horizon. And of course, this is one of the things that you'll be learning or be forced to learn how to do in the game, because you do need to look 2 or 3 decisions in advance in order to have the amount of capacity that you're going to need. That has to be built over it takes an entire year to build a new factory and another year to get that factory to come up to a normal level of operation. So you're automatically going to have to begin to think in multi-year terms. Now, Porter says that strategy is developed on multiple levels. The first is at the corporate strategy level, and this is where the enterprise will go and how to get there. And this is something that's the sole domain of the CEO. And what he does is lay out the entire plan and is able to look at all the aspects of the business and putting that plan together. The second level, which is the one that we're going to be involved with the game, is competitive strategy. And this is really the majority of the activity in any company. It's how to address the marketplace, because it's the interface between you and your public and you and your competitors. And how you're going to, this is how you're going to interact with the marketplace to achieve your corporate strategy. And here's a question that you got to be asking yourself tonight at about 11:10. How are we going to respond to what the other guys are doing? And for the first time, you're going to see what the other guys are doing, because you'll have the competitive efforts report, comparative competitive efforts report, which will show how each of you made your decisions and what things resulted from them in this first round. So the focus of the whole game is on this element of strategy. And everything you do in a competitive strategy should support the overall corporate strategy that you have. And part of this can be defined by how you're going to approach the marketplace, with either what will probably be either a low cost, low price strategy or a differentiation strategy. Now, there's a third level to strategic thinking, and that's in functional strategy. And that means, just as I said, the competitive strategy supports the corporate strategy. Every activity center in the enterprise is going to have its own strategy, all of which will be supportive of the overall corporate strategy. Every company has at least three functions, and that doesn't matter whether it's a service company, if it's all people just doing things rather than making a product, a tangible product. All companies will have a marketing, finance, and operations function at least. And that's probably how you should set up your corporate organization for your game. In addition, there are the other functions that are also important, but are not absolutely fundamental to operating a business. Things like information technology, human resources, R&D, any kind of long-term planning, any of that will have its own strategy to be supportive of the corporate strategy. And this is all documented with some kind of an operating plan or written plan, which ultimately we're going to call, when we get down to the end of the line, we not only have strategic thinking at the highest level, but we also have strategy being articulated at the very bottom of the organization. Everyone has to have some kind of a plan. So the game that we're going to be working with deals almost exclusively, I'm going to say almost, although the slide says exclusively, with competitive strategy. And Porter says this, he says that competitive strategy, we looked at whether you could have competition to be the best. He says you want to be unique. And competitive strategy is about being different from your competitors by choosing, and then I don't really understand these two terms. He says to perform activities differently or to perform different activities. Now I can read those words and I can get the gist of what he's saying, but I can't see how performing activities differently is different from performing different activities. The fact that those little stars beside that, the little red stars, indicates that this is what we're going to, a couple things we're going to be looking at as we go forward. Here's something that's important because it's got the yellow star up in the corner. Porter's principle is this: we don't compete to be the best, we compete to be unique. And he said that good competitive strategies will result in sustainably superior performance to the extent we maintain our differences. That is, once we've set it up and we've got the things that we do that are different, as long as we stick with those, we can sustain our strategy. And by sustaining it, presumably we will end up with superior performance. So this word sustainably gets used twice, two different ways. I ended up teaching a class over at one of the other colleges here a year or so ago. And my class was called Sustainable Strategic Management. And I said, man, this is duck soup. I know what strategic management is. And I know that the objective always is to have sustainability in the strategy we put together. And sustainability says you can keep on doing it year after year and still be able to defend your position effectively. But what that course was all about was sustainability from the perspective of saving the planet and how we could do things to, or how different companies were doing things to be more judicious in their use of non-renewable resources and how they were trying to reduce their pollution factor. Just as I said with community responsibility, social responsibility, and community involvement, I think those are natural things that a company should do. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on that aspect. And it does not get emphasized. That is, trying to save the planet is not part of your game. What we do want to have, though, is a strategy, as I said, that will be good for at least a couple of years and hopefully a lot longer, because it's set up in a way to defend you against the attacks of the various factors that can upset your apple cart. So one of the things that happens with this, and I've emphasized this before, but now it's for real, because you are playing the game in order to get the best score you can in hopes of getting the best grade you can. You don't have to have just one winner in this game. And I told you about how one year I had, in one particular class, I had 10 teams, and that's frequently how many I'll have. And 8 of those 10s ended up with scores that were above 100%. Now, the makers of the game put out a scorecard every week. And if you're doing particularly well, they'll rank you as far as your performance relative to the 5 factors that you're measured on for the investor expectations. On those 5 factors, it'll measure the top 50 and 100 people playing the game that week. And at any given time, there's about 5,000 teams playing this game. And in one session, one particular set of decisions, I had, and I probably had 3 games going at that time with 15, with what would have been a total of about 30 teams. I ended up, my teams ended up in the top 100 in 43 positions. So that meant that they were high, maybe in earnings per share, but also in profitability, and I don't know what the other 3 are, but it was a truly outstanding set of numbers. But it reflected the fact that there was not just one winner. There were lots of people that could win. So the game is set up in a way, the game is not set up. Your approach to the game allows the game to reward every team with excellent results. Now, Porter describes, he talks about 3 different generic approaches, but I'll bet you 95% of you will use one of the first 2. Low cost provider, and low cost provider means low cost and low prices. But it's not low prices in that you got to be in the gutter. It's low prices relative to the prices that your competitors are charging, or for the same value that they're charging for the same value as with your product. And second is differentiation, or differentiated products. And differentiated products are more valuable in the eyes of the customer because of some characteristic or multiple characteristics that increase the value in their mind. There's a third one that's mentioned in the game. It's called a niche or niche focus. And this is where you would use, for example, a different strategy in North America than you do in Latin America. And why would you do that? Well, in North America, your consumers have more money and more ability to make discretionary purchases. South America's got a lot of people that need shoes, but they don't have as much money. And so I would be inclined to use a different approach to sell in North America than I would in Latin America. Correspondingly, if I were moving into or trying to sell in Europe, Africa, that's all the area around the Mediterranean and north. This is, again, an area where people have lots of money, lots of ability to spend discretionary money on things like shoes. So I could use a high-end kind of a pricing and model development with that particular marketplace. Now, a lot of different ways that can be made on each of these approaches. And one thing I've done here is down in the corner, I put a little picture, and that's to remind me to stop sharing and ask you all what you think about this and what your plans are for this game in this round?
So for our team, Team H, we had our first meeting yesterday. And so we did discuss a little bit of our plan. We organized ourselves somewhat, and so we know who's going to be taking care of which specific two major parameters. So someone be taking care of the more the marketing stuff, someone a little bit more on the logistics side, someone a little bit more on the personnel HR side, and someone a little bit more on the finance side. But we're also when we're meeting, then we're all going to get together and see, all right, this is what we've managed, this is what we've changed, and so then we can work together, because we also understand that if someone makes a few changes here and there, it can make some other major effects to some of the numbers for some of the other corresponding departments. So we have to obviously work together there as a group to make those decisions, because it's very common that you'll make just one little change and then boop, a whole lot of numbers are out of place.
Yeah, and it's not so much that that happens with the numbers, it's when you don't know that's going to hit you because somebody else made the change.
Right.
So, good. Well, that's a good beginning. Now, have you selected which way you're gonna, which direction you're gonna go with the three strategies I outlined up there? You probably would come up with two of them on your own without ever reading any of the strategy stuff.
Probably. I mean, we didn't really discuss so much on which of those three we're going to go with. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in our next meeting.
Okay, and that's fine. But when you finally hit in on where you want to be, stick with it. Don't swap horses in the middle of the stream. That was what Abraham Lincoln said.
Mhm.
So that's good. Anyone else have any comment on that? And I did pick up that Sing Liang Fan is here. And there's one other person that I had not called up before I picked up. So no other ideas, huh? Well, I appreciate what you had to say, Jose, and that's the kind of thing that gets good grades, because I want to see that people are thinking and involved. So I appreciate what you had to say there. So let's go back and we'll go a little further and try it again a little farther along here. So the next thing that we want to look at is Porter also mentions, and there is a chart in the BSG game, which I'll be using later, and not tonight, but in later lecture, where he talks about best cost. And that's a strategy based on having low costs accompanied by differentiation. And this is difficult to do because Porter says it's a weak position because low cost providers have lower costs than you do because they don't have to differentiate. And differentiation usually costs money. They're just working on chipping away at their lower costs, and they can chip away against you and undercut you on price. And at the same time, the differentiated providers who have spent more money trying to make their product different and better, they chip away at you with their superior differentiation attributes. So it's the kind of thing where you're attacked on both ends. But in spite of the fact that this is a relatively unstable position, as Porter outlines it, you are going to find that in blue ocean strategy, which we'll look at probably about 2 weeks before the end of the semester. It relies on best cost, and they've got a unique way. Those authors have a unique way of approaching the market, which we'll look at in some detail. Now, star up in the corner. One thing true of all strategic approaches is we want to give the lowest acceptable quality and performance in what the product offers, even though this goes against the grain of everything we've learned about in marketing. And now I ask you the question, why is that?
Because if we can get away with spending less money on a product or spend less money on creating, the best product ever, and people are still happy with it, then those are costs that's money that stays in our pocket. It's money we don't have to spend.
Yeah, and we're going to see it could be money you save to put in your pocket, or it's money that you save that you can share with them in terms of a lower price. So what we want to do is give the customer what they want and not make them pay for anything over and above what they want. And it's so frequent that what happens, and I keep referring to the president of the company out on the golf course with his best customer. And the best customer whispers sweet nothings in his ear about having an additional feature on the product that he could buy a lot more. But the problem is when that feature does get incorporated, it now has to be paid for by every other customer on your customer list. And so you have to be very disciplined to avoid adding features that not everybody needs, or that on which you cannot get a fair return on investment. Anyone else have anything to say? Thank you, Ryan. And get your courage screwed up here to be involved in the conversation, all the rest of you, because this is an important part of your learning and an important part of my grading. I want you to be thinking all the time. And there's the answer to the question I raised. We don't want to increase cost and price and giving the customer something he doesn't need and doesn't want to pay for. And you can go out, and I know that you go to the store and you buy products and say, I would rather pay less for this, or things on this product I don't need. Go buy a piece of electronic equipment and they got about a half a dozen different cords and everything that you buy, and you only need one of them. Why don't they put up a rack with the other, all 6 of them on a rack where you could select the ones that fit with the product you need and keep your cost to a minimum? Because if they put all 6 in the box, you're going to have to pay for all 6. I got a whole box of unusable cords in my basement. So what we constantly want to be doing, and what you're going to be looking at, trying to figure out, is how can we skinny down the product to only offer what the customers want and eliminate all the others. Now, in your manufacturing side, you have the ability to adjust your SQ rating. It's something you invest in, and if you get that too high, there's very little return on the investment for that. You have a range of between 0 and 10. At 0, you won't be able to give the stuff away. But when you get up above a 3, all of a sudden you begin to get some interest on the basis of quality. You start off at a level 4. And someplace between 4 and 7 is probably the sweet spot. But you've got to find out where that is by testing your market. So you may start off at the 4 and then kick it up to a 5 or a 6, which you do by one of your decisions is to invest money in SQ rating. Effectively, I think what it is either your styling department or your R&D department that's developing new kinds of shoes. And on the other hand, you can jimmy around with different qualities of raw materials. So you can use low quality material or low cost materials or high cost premium materials. And how you mix and match with that determines the actual desirability of the shoe from the customer's point of view. So you need to be looking at how this relates to your operations and also to your marketing mix, because you may, if you're overspending on advertising, you're not getting any bang for the buck. And clearly, there were people in the examples I showed you last time that were overspending on marketing because they weren't making any product. And so all of their money was wasted. So this is something that you want to be, these first couple of rounds, you want to really keep some good records on what your decision making was on areas like that in the marketing mix, so that you can go back and review and see whether you got a payback on the money that you spent in that area. There's a couple of things you need to recognize. There's a basic economic principle that as prices go down, volume goes up. And correspondingly, as prices go up, volume goes down. And there will be times when you'll want to reduce your prices in order to get more volume. And there may be situations where all your factories are so full of product. And by that, I mean the entire industry's factories are full of product. And you can find that on that one chart that shows you the demand and the availability of manufacturing capability. And if you don't remember that, I've got that Zoom lecture out on Blackboard, and you can go review it. Let's see. There will be times when you'll want to reduce the prices, conceivably reduce the prices to get more volume, and where correspondingly there may be times when you get the chance to increase prices to drive down volume a little bit because you're oversold. Now, in either case, what you need to be sure to do is work close to maximum capacity. And again, we'll stop here and just ask you, why is that true?
Well, you want to work to your maximum capacity to be able to get, kind of a bang for your buck kind of idea. So you want to really maximize that labor force, and for example, always make sure you're using your space efficiently, that your workers are able to get to what they need to quickly, because I mean, in all of that, it's the longer it takes, for example, for someone to get to, let's say, a piece of equipment, that's time wasted. That that's time being wasted, that something's not being manufactured, or whatever it might be. And so that obviously ultimately costs time, costs money down the line.
Yeah, and I give you an example right now. As you can see by looking back behind me, I have a lot of books. And some of those are quite valuable, and I have a guy who will fix them for me. And it may cost me $200 or $300 to fix a book up correctly. This is one that is pretty rare. Unfortunately, this guy got squeezed out when the market was real high, and he had to move out of his office space. He had one of the small garage type places that he worked in. And he took all his equipment home, and he continually is very slow in getting back with the things that I've asked him to fix, because he doesn't have any equipment available. He's got to reorganize his home garage every time he gets a slightly different kind of a thing to do for repair. And there's no way he can make any money. He's spending all his time schlepping around different heavy pieces of equipment. And of course, half the time he's complaining that he's wrenching his back, and he's had to spend 2 or 3 days in bed trying to sleep it off. So what are you going to do? The thing is, you got to have the right tools available. Now, specifically, if you had a plant, let's suppose you had a plant that could produce 1 million pairs of shoes, and it costs you $1 million a year just to maintain it. If you didn't produce anything, it would still cost you $1 million with the overhead. Now, if it has a capacity for 1 million pairs of shoes and you make 1 million pairs of shoes, how much of that overhead do you have to allocate to every pair of shoes?
$1.
Right, Caitlin. $1, $1. That's what it's going to cost. Now, supposing that you were not able to do real well and you could only get 100,000 pairs out instead of 1 million, what will that do to the overhead allocation?
Increase it by a lot.
And I know you can figure that out. It's the same kind of arithmetic. What's 100,000 into $1 million?
And
Caitlin, I'm relying on you to grab a piece of paper and start lopping off zeros.
10%, no?
Francisco just said 10.
Yeah, yeah. You say outran you here, but that's absolutely correct. So what does that mean, Caitlin? What are you going to have to allocate to every pair of shoes?
$10.
Yeah. So it's a difference of $1 and $10 just based on how many pairs of shoes you run through the factory. And that gives you, as the efficient operator who's got a strong selling position, a $9 price advantage over your competitors. Well, it wouldn't be over the least effective of your competitors. So this is the place where you can really work with your costs. Now you can do the same thing with a mix of advertising and dealer support. The dealers will work harder the more money you give them. But the advertising support will pull product through. So you've got to decide where that sweet spot is between advertising and dealer support. And the same is true with the breadth of product that you offer. If you offer lots of products, all your customers will be happy. Your salesmen will be happy, and your production department will be complaining, because every time they make a changeover to a different model style, it takes time, whether it's non-productive time, and they end up with some scraps left over that could be making shoes if they kept on running. But they're not going to keep around a bunch of left soles or right soles just because they ended up on the floor. So you end up with higher costs, and you end up with a higher reject rate, which also affects your profits. You catch that? So this is a very significant part of getting a good, efficient operation, is you've got to be thinking about how those costs are accrued. Now, a low-cost provider isn't somebody who just cuts price. And there's a lot of people out there that do that. They're trying to keep up with the guy down the street and match his prices, but they don't give any thought to their costs, other than knowing that they're probably breaking the bank by not having a way to lower their costs. All they've got is the ability to lower their price. So you have to remember, anytime you do a price cut, it has to be matched with a cost cut in order to maintain the margins. Now, here's some specific ways in which the low-cost strategy can apply to the game. And I'm going to be mixing and matching these because, again, I have some difficulty understanding the difference between doing things differently and doing different things. But one area is clearly control of the cost drivers. Now, one of your cost drivers is the factory, the cost of that factory. Another one is going to be freight costs. If you have to go make product in, say, Asia Pacific and ship it to, say, North America, because North America ends up being short of product. And there may be a time though when that makes good sense to do, because that product could be shipped from Asia Pacific to Latin America. But when it goes to Latin America, you have to pay duty. Whereas if you ship it to North America, a North American plant can ship product to Latin America and there's no duty because we have a free market between those two areas. So those are, it's also some way to do things a little differently. So how this plays out, scale economies, high capacity utilization. Scale economies is how big you have to be before you can get to the bottom of the cost barrel. Obviously, a company like Walmart can buy a lot better than a single outlet, five and dime or general merchandise store, because they've got the scale to force all of their suppliers to give them low prices. So high capacity utilization in your factory, the closer you can get to 100%, the better your costs are going to be. Because this allows you not only to spread that $1 or $10 on every pair of shoes, but also spreads out the R&D costs, your advertising costs, and other things that you might do like that have applicability throughout the company to improve the cost allocation per pair. The second thing is experience curve. And this is something, you probably all have heard of Moore's Law, where it talks about how every 18 months you double the speed and capacity of computer chips. And I don't have that exactly right, but that's the way that experience curve works. Well, it turns out that that's true in all, I'm going to say all kinds of companies. And this has been studied over dozens of industries, over hundreds of companies within those industries, and it proves to be true that as you double the volume of the industry, not of the firm, but of the industry, the cost will come down 20 to 30%. And as you double the cost or double the volume again from that new starting point, the price will drop another 20 to 30%. And this is why we can talk about how IBM was able to sell a $2 million computer when I started to work there. And it's dropped down to where the equivalent amount of power is in my cell phone for $200, just a regular smartphone. And it's because of that cost curve coming down. It's true for every industry in every situation. Now, another thing that you can do is labor saving methods, and that is to do best practices or to do labor training. And these are things, incidentally, that you have to do continually. You can't do it just one time and expect it to work out for the rest of the game. You have to continually do it. The third thing is supply chain efficiency. And when I talked about shipping material from North America to Latin America, or that would be one way that you could improve supply chain efficiency if you normally were getting it from Asia Pacific, because you can eliminate the duty. People in Asia Pacific can ship to North America and not face any duty in this game. I guess we got tariffs going on now with China, but typically the game would tell you there are no duties between Asia and US. So you also have the ability to affect storage costs based on the amount of inventory you keep. The less inventory you have, the lower your inventory carrying costs are, and the more your customers like you, because you can deliver quickly. Then you have the ability here to control costs by using low cost versus high cost raw materials. Recognize, however, if all of you choose to use low cost materials, then you can make a good high quality shoe with low cost materials. The price on low cost will go up because when the demand's up, that's what you do, is you raise the raise the price. I think that's what's happening to my house. Because everyone wants to, not everyone, but a large number of people want to buy up here in the mountains. And there's a relatively limited supply. So the prices are going to go up. Correspondingly with high cost materials, if nobody's buying them because everyone's buying the low cost stuff, then their prices are going to come down. So there'll be always a matter of balancing out between those two important components in your shoe costs. Now, I said that the first one all related to controlling cost drivers, but you also have the opportunity for doing cost bypassing activities. And the biggest one, and here we are doing different things, is with internet sales. That's direct to end user sales. Incidentally, every place I've got the red star, it's something that you can do in the game. Now, I've already put this whole set of slides out on Blackboard so you can go back and look at it to pick anything up out of that you want. So direct end user sales is doing something different. Another thing you can do is relocate closer to suppliers or customers. So using again the example of Latin America, where we're currently servicing that out of our plants in Asia and plants in North America, we can open a factory down in Latin America. And that puts you closer. And that means you can have a shorter timeline for delivery. Plus, there just is a general feeling better about knowing you've got a local supplier. Another thing you could do is offer no frills product or service. And I told you you could do that with large expensive equipment. If you've got buyers who are sophisticated, they don't need the aftermarket service support or the technicians to go with the product. You can't do anything about that in this game, but it is an important thing to remember as you scale the product to meet the needs of your customer. And then finally, you can have a limited versus full line of product. And that's where I said that sales loves you if you can have a large number of products to offer, and manufacturing hates you. So it's someplace between 500 and 50, or 50 and 500 is the sweet spot for where you're going to get the best, where you keep everybody a little bit happy. So remember that low cost leadership means low overall costs and not just low manufacturing or production costs. And it definitely does not mean giving unsustainable discounts. Those who do that are on their way to oblivion. I've got a couple more points here, and I'm going to take you right up to the to 7:30. Is that okay? Is everybody gone?
We're here, Professor.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, some of you still remain. Okay, but we'll get out real close to 7:30. In a low cost, low price, you have to continue investing in advertising, celebrities, and dealer incentives to maintain your dealer network. So just cutting your costs is not a matter of slashing advertising costs. Now, particularly when you're buying celebrities, nobody knows you've got the celebrity until you advertise them. And when you buy that celebrity, the year in which you make the contract, you get no benefit of having the celebrity. It's the next year that they are out in the marketplace. So you've got to support them with advertising. And so what you're attempting to do always is to create differences that are difficult for rivals to match. And if you were to go into, say, the 50 shoe market instead of the 500 and build all of your strategy around really selling that kind of a product, it's going to be difficult for other people to invade your market space. And it's the combination of the 10 items that we talked about a week or so ago that really determine your uniqueness. Now, this is the last point I want to go with you tonight. What are you going to do with the cost savings? If you buy down your costs, what are you going to do? You can pass them through to the customers with lower prices. This increases your volume. It discourages competition because they have to go through the agony of getting their costs down in order to compete with you. And by your bringing down the prices as you've lowered your costs, you're making it more and more difficult for them to get in and make a reasonable market. Or you can retain the savings. Don't reduce the price. There, your volume remains the same, but your margin per unit goes up. You got money you can stick in your pocket, but other competitors are going to look at that and see that there's an opportunity for them to come in and build lower costs and undercut you on both volume and also on costs. So this is a decision that you have to make. And the question is, what are you going to do? And I think the answer is going to be that you all are going to say, well, I got to go home. My mother's calling. So that's where I'm going to stop right now. So this will be out on Blackboard. I'll try and get